that out. But we've also when we have data concerns, we've been working around by trying to focus on things that aren't just data driven and making sure that we can still move forward even without having data at all times, which I'm sure everyone here has dealt with. Another big challenge is getting approval from higher up. I would say at the Brigham, this is our biggest problem just because everything, especially with our patient involvement kind of stuff, that's 6 months to get a patient survey approved. But we have one woman in our work group is amazing. She's involved in multiple different opioid related interventions at the Brigham. And she talks to everyone and will tell us what problems are going to arise when we're trying to get things approved. So that's helping things move a little smoother. Team members, the people who sign up to be on this team are people who really, really care about this problem. And so one of the biggest problems is when we expand and try and add more providers or go beyond. We have a pharm tech on our team who can take on every task and is amazing, but some of the other people don't want to take on extra tasks. So we have to work hard to make sure that these opinions are coming through to us when we're designing interventions. And we've been doing that through testing and surveying and then kind of trying to redo things as we go. And then the last difference would be clinician versus engineering prioritization differences. Obviously, everyone tries to compromise, but even things with like spread, that's probably been, I say it every meeting, we'll talk about that next week. So it's kind of picking and choosing your battles, but all in all, it's been a great project to work on. And I've enjoyed it. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Katie, who works on the Mount Auburn project for transition home care.
Hey everybody, so I'm Katie Smith. I work on the Mount Auburn project. We're focusing on safe transitions from hospital to home care, and we've applied fewer methods in the Brigham, but we're also we're a bit younger of a project. So I want to talk to you today about FMEA, which is going to be focused more around how we studied failure in our system. So I think almost everybody knows about FMEA or failure modes effects analysis, but just to give you guys a quick brief on it. After determining failure modes, you want to assess the severity, the probability, and the detection rate, and then you multiply them together to get your risk priority number. And this is a super common tool used in QI projects, and we wanted to apply it to ours. So for our project, we ended up having a series of weekly meetings at 7 in the morning on Wednesdays, and our teams kind of varied. So at first we had a smaller team, and as we went along in the process of doing the FMEA, we realized that we needed to pull in more and more stakeholders in order to get a truly accurate assessment of the failures in the system. And this actually included involving the director of our case management program, some quality personnel from the home care side, 2 PCPs. We had 3 different patient caregivers who came in and gave their perspective of the patient. And it ended up being a longer process, but in total we ended up with 13 different failures. The highest severities of them are listed here. We focused our project around these, so the redesign process that we've chosen addresses these, but they are that inpatient and outpatient care don't seem to work together as a team, that at the absolute highest priority number of 810, and then the 2 below that tied at 648, and those were that no standard risk identification method existed, and there was no way to share that risk even if it was identified. So if a patient was identified as high risk in the hospital, they might not necessarily be flagged that anywhere in their system, and that wouldn't be communicated to home care. So they would have to almost repeat the risk assessment or just kind of fly blind. And then for the second one was that there was a lack of understanding about what medication reconciliation was and when it should happen, which is a huge problem in healthcare, as a whole. But for Mount Auburn, it ended up definitely from the patient side ruining a lot of people's chances of having a really safe transition, because if a patient doesn't know what medication they're taking or can't remember it in the hospital, and they're prescribed other new things, that could end up with some pretty severe adverse events. So after completing this FMEA, there were a lot of different takeaways and learnings that we had, both on the project side and on the methodology side. In terms of the project, We know that stakeholder engagement is super important, and if anything, using FMEA here highlighted that again and again and again. So we needed to involve more stakeholders, and that was huge, and doing that really did give us a better understanding of the problem, and that the buy-in from them is huge. They need to be invested in the project, and they need to really believe that this project is worth it. Teams are kind of challenged to stay focused. Part of the reason why our FMEA took 4 months was that it was very easy for the team's conversations to kind of digress into specified stories about patients, etc. And so we had to kind of try really hard to keep the entire project on track. And that risk stratification and reliability design concepts are very, very useful. In terms of the methodology, FMEA has been proven once again to be a robust tool for prioritizing problems. It also has a lot of value in team building and developing a shared understanding of the process and building consensus across the entire organization for the need to change. And the last two is that good enough data often is good enough. You might not have, in our case, definitely we did not have any data from the hospital. We're still fighting them on it a year in. But having some of their publicly reported data, and then also getting experiential data points from the physicians was really helpful for us. And that while experience matters in this, working in a interdisciplinary team that is majority healthcare personnel, it doesn't matter as much, because as long as you are I don't know how to describe it. As long as you as an engineer are kind of pushing towards this is how you do an FMEA and you're guiding them through it, if they have buy-in in the project, they will follow you. But that being said, we did face several challenges, and those being that it is difficult to familiarize a team with new methods, and that a lot of the methods that we've chosen, especially FMEA, they do take a little bit longer time to conduct than probably would have been the most ideal for the project timeline. And then forming these high functioning teams across healthcares and engineering cultures can just be difficult. One problem that I've personally faced is that I've had to figure out a lot of different ways to say the same thing, because my go-to explanation might not necessarily mean the same thing to someone in healthcare. So that's been a challenge that we've been facing, and I think we're getting a lot better at dealing with. And that there's kind of a thing for perpetual meeting syndrome and a fear of analytical models. And one of the ways that we found to actually solve that is to kind of lead from behind. So without being as forward and as aggressive with leadership and as with ideas, you can kind of nudge the process, nudge the team in the direction that is going towards process improvement and actually moving on with the project. And among that, there are other strategies, and those include leveraging any and all teachable moments, so that way you can really get the patient to the patients, the healthcare personnel to be on your side and understand what's going on. So, and then finally, we've been learning how to work without data, and that's been difficult for us because we've definitely wanted to be able to say here's our baseline measures, here's the amount that we want to improve it, and we really can't with this project. And so we've been driving in engineering design concepts with the team, and we've been moving the project forward without it, knowing that hopefully one day when we do get data, we'll be able to say look at data from before the project started and look at data now and really see our improvement. So with that, I want to turn it over to Joe, and he's going to talk about system redesign, and specifically at his hospital, Boston Children's.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe. I'm a master's student, and I've been leading the engineering work at Boston Children's Hospital. So I'm going to talk about design. Design stems from rigorous understanding of processes, process logic, process activities, from failures, and then using this combined approach to think about a design strategy that is going to make the process better. So we followed the same methodology as Katie has described for Mount Auburn and Annie has described for the Brigham and Women. I will step through very quickly through those methods and tell you what we've learned. So the project is about